Greetings to all of our guests today. We are delighted to have this opportunity to welcome the president of the Presidential Leadership Council in Yemen, His Excellency Rashad al-Alimi, to this interview to make some comments. As many of you know, President al-Alimi is on his first visit to the United States and addressed the UN General Assembly on Thursday, September 22nd. This will be his only opportunity to speak to a broader audience while he's here. As many of you already know, President al-Alimi has had a long and distinguished career in public service in Yemen, serving previously as the Minister of Interior, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister for Security in the administration of Ali Abdullah Saleh, and then was a member of the National Dialogue Conference during that period. He became the president of the Presidential Leadership Council in April of this year, and has served in that capacity now for almost 6 months. So without further ado, I want to turn the microphone over to President al-Alimi, who will make some comments, and then we'll have an opportunity to have a conversation after that. So President al-Alimi, the floor is yours.
شكرا كثيرا سعادة السفير، وشكرا لهذه الفرصة للحديث من خلال معهد الشرق الأوسط، ونحن نقدر تقديرا عاليا الجهود التي يقوم بها المعهد، وفي مقدمتها سعادة السفير فريشتاين. وأنا تربطني علاقة شخصية بسعادة السفير منذ أن كان سفيرا للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية في صنعاء، وقد عاصر الأحداث التاريخية التي مرت بها اليمن في 2011، وكان له دور رئيسي في التحول في تلك الفترة. هذا التحول الذي تم بناء على المبادرة الخليجية، وتم عقد مؤتمر الحوار الوطني الشامل، والذي كان قصة نجاح للمجتمع الدولي والإقليمي، وكان في مقدمة المهندسين لهذا العمل التاريخي سعادة السفير فريشتاين، باعتباره سفيرا للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية حينها. ولكن للأسف قصة النجاح هذه التي تم رسمها من خلال مؤتمر الحوار الوطني ومخرجاته، تم إفساد فرحة اليمنيين بهذه النتائج، وانقلبت الميليشيات الحوثية على هذه المخرجات في سبتمبر 2014، واستولت على السلطة ومؤسسات الدولة، وعدنا إلى مرحلة الصراع والإقصاء والتهميش والعنف، بعد أن كان مؤتمر الحوار يقوم على مبدأي الشراكة والتوافق. ونحن اليوم سنتحدث عن الوضع الذي وصلنا إليه. هناك 3 قضايا رئيسية سأتحدث معكم فيها اليوم. أولى هذه القضية وهي قضية الساعة، وهي المتعلقة بالوضع الإنساني الكارثي في اليمن الذي ترتب على إسقاط الدولة في 2014، وما ترتب عليها من صراع استمر لمدة 7 سنوات. هذه الحرب أدت إلى نتائج كارثية بالنسبة لليمنيين. سواء على المستوى الإنساني أو على المستويات الأخرى المتعلقة بتدمير كافة الخدمات ومؤسسات الدولة. وتشرد الكثير من اليمنيين وتحولوا إلى لاجئين، أكثر من 4 مليون لاجئ في اليمن في معسكرات تفتقد لأبسط الحقوق الإنسانية، وهناك ملايين أيضا يمكن بنفس العدد يتواجدون في دول أخرى في المنطقة وفي دول التحالف الداعم للشرعية. يوجد لدينا أكثر من 3 مليون في المملكة العربية السعودية، وهناك أيضا مئات الآلاف في مصر وبقية دول الخليج ودول العالم. الهدنة الإنسانية التي بدأت في أبريل الماضي أعتقد أنها كانت فرصة لكي يتنفس اليمنيون الصعداء ويبدأون بتلقي بعض الخدمات الإنسانية سواء على مستوى التنقل أو على مستوى المتطلبات الرئيسية. هذه الهدنة نحن عندما تشكل مجلس القيادة الرئاسي جددناها للمرة الثانية والثالثة، واعتبرنا أنها فرصة تاريخية للانتقال إلى مرحلة وقف شامل لإطلاق النار، الانتقال إلى مرحلة مشاورات سياسية تفضي إلى حل شامل وعادل يعيد لليمنيين دولتهم، ويعيد أيضا لليمنيين الأمل بمستقبل أفضل لليمنيين واليمنيات والأطفال اليمنيين الذين اليوم يتوزعون بين مناطق تحت سيطرة الميليشيات وأخرى تحت سيطرة الحكومة الشرعية، ولكنهم يفتقدون إلى الأمل في مستقبل أفضل بسبب تدني مستوى التعليم من ناحية، وقيام الميليشيات بتجنيد الأطفال من المدارس وتسخيرهم لمعاركها من جهة أخرى. الهدنة اليوم مهددة، وأنتم تعرفون أن الهدنة قامت على 3 عناصر رئيسية. العنصر الأول هو فتح مطار صنعاء ودخول المشتقات النفطية من ميناء الحديدة، والعنصر الثالث وهو فتح الطرق تعز. الحكومة الشرعية قامت بالإيفاء بما التزمت به. اليوم لدينا أكثر من 21,000 غادروا من مطار صنعاء، بالرغم من أن الحوثيين يمنعون الغير موالين لهم من المغادرة من مطار صنعاء. اليوم هناك أكثر من 50 سفينة مشتقات نفطية دخلت من ميناء الحديدة، ولكن حتى هذه اللحظة الحوثيون يمتنعون عن فتح طرق تعز، ولا ندري ما هي المبررات. هناك ضغوط من المجتمع الدولي والمنظمات المعنية بحقوق الإنسان لرفع الحصار عن تعز الذي استمر حتى الآن أكثر من 5 سنوات، ولكن الحوثيين لا زالوا مصرين على عدم فتح الطرق. هناك اليوم ضغوط علينا لاستمرار الهدنة، وهذه الضغوط نحن نأخذها بعين الاعتبار لأنها ضغوط إنسانية بالنسبة لنا. نحن انحزنا للشعب واعتبرنا أن هذه الهدنة وهذه التنازلات التي نقدمها هي من أجل رفع المعاناة عن أخوتنا آبائنا وأمهاتنا وأخواتنا في 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 المناطق اللي تحت سيطرة الحوثيين. وهذه التنازلات نقدمها اليوم وسنقدمها في المستقبل، ولكن السؤال المطروح هو ما هي العناصر الجديدة التي سيفرضها الحوثيون على تجديد الهدنة؟ نحن بالنسبة لنا الهدنة بالنسبة لنا مكسب لليمنيين جميعا، ولكن لا ينبغي أن تكون هذه الهدنة على حساب تنازلات ومكاسب للميليشيات الحوثية، ولا تكون أيضا مزيد من التمكين للميليشيات، وهذه لا تخدم عملية السلام، ليس بالنسبة لليمنيين ولكن بالنسبة للمنطقة وبالنسبة للعالم وبالنسبة للملاحة الدولية وخطوط الملاحة الدولية. وأنتم تعرفون التصريحات الصادرة من قيادات الحوثيين وأيضا من حزب الله، الذين يعتبرون أن معركتهم القادمة ستكون في باب المندب. نحن نقدم تنازلات من أجل شعبنا، والحوثيون يتكلمون عن انتصار سياسي، يعتبرون أن هذه التنازلات هي انتصار سياسي للميليشيات. نحن لا يهمنا ذلك، ما يهمنا هو أن يستفيد اليمنيون من هذه الهدنة، وبالتالي ليس لدينا مانع في استمرار الهدنة، ولكن ليس بالشروط التي يريد الحوثيون أن يفرضوها كشرط وابتزاز للمجتمع الدولي ليحققوا المزيد من المكاسب. نحن نقول يجب أن يفتحوا طرق تعز، ليس لدينا مانع من تمديد الهدنة الإنسانية، وبالتالي كل القضايا بعد ذلك تخضع للنقاش والحوار. هناك تفاصيل كثيرة أعتقد ليس وقتها مناسب الآن للحديث حولها، فيما يتعلق بالجوازات، بالوثائق، بالمشتقات النفطية، بالمرتبات الموظفين، في قضايا كثيرة. هذا يمكن موضوع الساعة الذي الكل يتحدث عنه، ونحن فعلا يعني لدينا آمال كبيرة في أن تحقق هذه الهدنة، الانتقال إلى مرحلة جديدة من وقف إطلاق نار وسلام دائم وشامل. الموضوع الثاني وهو متعلق بمجلس الرئاسة، مجلس القيادة الرئاسي. أكيد الكل يتساءل مجلس القيادة الرئاسي اليوم أين هو؟ إلى أين وصل؟ ما هي التحديات التي تواجه هذا المجلس؟ طبعا أنتم تعرفون أن المجلس مشكل على قاعدتي التوافق والشراكة، وقاعدة التوافق والشراكة لا شك أنها لها كثير من المتطلبات. هناك مكاسب تحققت لأطراف موجودة معنا في المجلس خلال ال7 سنوات، وهناك شركاء جدد يريدون أن يحققوا ولو جزء من مكاسب من خلال تواجدهم في المجلس. ومهمتي ربما مهمتي مع إخواني في المجلس أن نعمل على تحقيق هذه الشراكة، وأن نعمل على تحقيق أهدافنا المشتركة. أهدافنا المشتركة اليوم تعتمد على هدفين رئيسيين. الهدف الأول هو إعادة بناء مؤسسات الدولة في العاصمة المؤقتة عدن، والهدف الثاني هو تقديم مزيد من الخدمات للمناطق المحررة، والهدف الثالث هو تحسين مستوى معيشة المواطنين من خلال الحفاظ على العملة وغيره. طبعا مجلس القيادة الرئاسي اليوم معني بهذه الأهداف، هي استعادة الدولة بشكل رئيسي، واستعادة الدولة كما قلنا من أول يوم نحن دعاة سلام ولسنا دعاة حرب، ولازمنا نأمن على أن يكون هناك محادثات سلام قادمة يستحق بها اليمنيون أن يستعيدوا دولتهم، وأن يكون نظامهم السياسي قائم على مشاركة واسعة من كل اليمنيين واليمنيات، ولأن احتكار السلطة وفرض أمر واقع من أي طرف لا شك أنه غير مقبول من كافة اليمنيين. نحن تجاوزنا الكثير من التحديات في المجلس. هناك أحداث حصلت في شبوة، وهناك أحداث حصلت في أبين، وستأتي حوادث أخرى وستأتي مشكلات أخرى، ولكن نحن نؤكد لكم أننا على تواصل دائم في إطار مجلس القيادة الرئاسي، ولدينا اجتماع قادم لأعضاء المجلس خلال الأسبوع القادم، وأنا متأكد أننا سنتجاوز الكثير من التحديات التي تواجه المجلس، لأن مهمتنا الرئيسية اليوم هو أن نبحث عن المشتركات فيما بيننا، وأن نؤجل أي خلافات أو تصورات للمستقبل، حيث أننا أولا نستعيد الدولة، ثم بعد ذلك عندما تستعاد الدولة سيتم الحديث عن مستقبل التصورات التي يمكن تكون موجودة عند أي طرف من الأطراف الموجودة معنا والمكونات السياسية الموجودة لدينا. طبعا حققنا بعض المنجزات خلال ال6 أشهر، وأنا لا أعتبرها منجزات، ولكن بسبب الأوضاع التي تعيشها اليمن أنا أعتبرها منجزات. نحن عدنا إلى عدن، استقرت مؤسسات الدولة في عدن بكافة سلطاتها، عاد مجلس القيادة، وعادت الحكومة، وعاد مجلس النواب، وعاد مجلس الشورى. عدنا بناء المؤسسات الأمنية والعسكرية، شكلنا لجنة أمنية وعسكرية، شكلنا لجان أمنية لإعادة ترتيب الأوضاع الأمنية على المستوى المركزي والمستوى المحلي في عدن. قمنا بإعادة تشكيل مجلس القضاء الأعلى، وفعلنا المؤسسات القضائية التي توقفت لمدة 2 سنين. اليوم القضاء يقوم بدوره، وهذه من أهم القضايا الرئيسية التي عملناها. نفذنا عدد من المشاريع الخدمية، وبعضها تحت التنفيذ الآن في عدن والمحافظات الأخرى، وبدعم من الأشقاء في المملكة العربية السعودية والإمارات العربية المتحدة. لدينا دعم أيضا إنساني وإغاثي في مقدمة هذه الدول الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، التي قدمت أكثر من $1 مليار، وهناك مساعدات أيضا من الاتحاد الأوروبي والمملكة المتحدة وبعض الدول الأخرى. اليوم مهمتنا كبيرة بالنسبة لإعادة الحياة إلى اليمنيين. فعلنا أيضا مؤسسات مكافحة الفساد، شكلنا لجنة غسيل الأموال في البنك المركزي، أعدنا تشكيل البنك المركزي، تشكيل مجلس الإدارة ومؤسسة البنك المركزي. عملنا على نعمل الآن على إعادة ترتيب الأوضاع المتعلقة بمكافحة الإرهاب. لدينا كثير من القضايا التي ينبغي أن نعملها، لأنه تعرفون أن هناك خطر داهم على اليمن، لأن هناك تخاذل بين الميليشيات الحوثية وبين تنظيم القاعدة. تم الإفراج عن عدد كبير من المحكوم عليهم من تنظيم القاعدة من سجون صنعاء، بما في ذلك المحكوم عليهم في قضية المدمرة الأمريكية SS كول، وتحركوا إلى المناطق المحررة للقيام بعمليات إرهابية، وتم مواجهة بين هذه العناصر وبين وحدات مكافحة الإرهاب قبل تقريبا 1.5 شهر وفي الضالع، واستشهد علينا 5 من الضباط والأفراد، في مقدمتهم قائد مكافحة الإرهاب في الضالع، وقتل 8 المهاجمين اللي هم من تنظيم داعش، وكان 2 منهم من الذي تم الإفراج عنهم من سجون صنعاء من قبل الميليشيات الحوثية. نحن نعرف أن هناك قاعدة ينطلقون منها، القاعدة وداعش والحوثيون، وهي فكرة أنهم يعني ضد النصارى وضد اليهود، وأنهم ويكفرون الآخر، وبالتالي هم ينطلقون من قاعدة فكرية واحدة، ويعتبرون الحكومة أنها موالية للغرب، وبالتالي في الحكومة كافرة من وجهة نظر هذه الجماعات، سواء في تنظيم القاعدة أو داعش أو الحوثيين. أعتقد هذا يمكن القضايا الرئيسية الذي حبيت أن أنا أتكلم عنها أمامكم اليوم. من المهم فعلا أن نلقى دعما كبيرا دوليا لمهام مجلس القيادة الرئاسي. مهم أن تدعم الحكومة الشرعية بكل الإمكانيات حتى تستطيع أولا أن تقدم مزيد من الخدمات للمواطنين وحل مشاكلهم، وحتى تستطيع أيضا أن تستعيد الدولة وتعطي نموذج للدولة ومؤسساتها في هذه المناطق التي تحت سيطرة الحكومة. أجدد شكري لكم سعادة السفير وللمشاركين معنا جميعا، وأنا سعيد أنني اليوم تحدث معكم، وكنت حريص على أن أتحدث معك اليوم، ونتمنى إن شاء الله أن نراك قريبا في اليمن.
Excellency, thank you so much for those comments and for your clarity in identifying what are the core issues, the central issues that are confronting you as the head of the Presidential Leadership Council, but more broadly the Yemeni people and how to go forward. And of course, you touched on, I think, the two issues that are really at the front of everyone's minds right now. One, of course, is, as we all know, this third 2-month truce is coming to an end in just a few days, October 2nd. And the question is, where do we go from here? And I think that you made the point that, of course, the Houthis are making more demands, and yet they have not fulfilled their commitments on Taz and elsewhere that they made even back in April for the first ceasefire. So the question is, where do we go from here? Is there a way forward for additional ceasefires, and how do we make the transition from these ceasefires to a more sustained political process that hopefully will bring an end to this conflict and allow the world to begin to address the humanitarian crisis that you discussed?
شكرا سعادة السفير. كما تفضلت، نحن نفكر أيضا بالقادم، لأنه ستنتهي الهدنة يوم 2 أكتوبر، وبالتالي ماذا بعد؟ الحوثيون يقدمون مطالب جديدة، في حين كما تفضلت لم يلتزموا بالمطالب بالالتزامات السابقة التي التزموا بها. وقبلها في اتفاقية ستوكهولم التزموا بدفع المرتبات من إيرادات ميناء الحديدة، وقاموا بنهب هذه المبالغ المالية من البنك المركزي في الحديدة وصادروا 45 مليار ريال. واليوم هناك مبالغ ضخمة ربما قد تصل إلى 300 مليار خلال ال6 أشهر من دخل المشتقات النفطية. فحولت اليمنيين إلى رهائن لمطالبها الغير مشروعة، وهذه كارثة، مثلما حولت البحر الأحمر والبحر العربي إلى رهينة لصافر. وأنتم تعرفون أن صافر مشكلتها كانت بسيطة للغاية، كان فقط هم يطالبون بقيمة المشتقات النفطية التي في صافر، والحكومة وافقت حينها أن لا مانع أن تحصل الميليشيات على قيمة هذه المشتقات، ثم غيروا رأيهم. واليوم المجتمع الدولي يجمع المبالغ المالية، بما في ذلك القطاع الخاص اليمني تبرعوا أيضا ببعض المبالغ، ونتمنى أن لا يغير الحوثيون وجهة نظرهم حول الموضوع صافر. دعنا ننتظر. نحن مع تمديد الهدنة أولا، ليس لدينا مانع من تمديد الهدنة، وإذا كان هناك أي قضايا تطرح أولا ينبغي أن يلتزم الحوثيون بتنفيذ فتح طرق تعز، ثم بعد ذلك إذا هناك قضايا أخرى ممكن تخضع للنقاش أثناء الهدنة التي فعلا نأمل أن يتم تجديدها بعد 2 أكتوبر.
Yeah, I think that the international community will certainly welcome a continuation of the truce. I think that there is an understanding that this period, even though it has not been fully implemented, still has given the Yemeni people a period of calm that has been important for them, and that has helped get Yemen back up on its feet a little bit. But I think until we get a more sustained process in place, it's going to be very difficult to go beyond that. I wanted to ask in that vein, there is, of course, as we all know, there is a global shortage of natural gas. Yemen was an exporter of natural gas. And unfortunately, at a moment where the potential for a great deal of revenue coming to Yemen through the sale of natural gas to Europe or elsewhere is there, there's no agreement that allows the government and the Houthis to permit the resumption of production at Belhaf and to go from there. Is that something that perhaps is being discussed through Hans Grunberg? Is that an opportunity or an option that might exist that would help pay these revenues, would pay not only civil service salaries, but also could get the Social Fund for Development working again, and other transfers to Yemeni citizens?
في الواقع هذا الموضوع نحن أولينا اهتمام كبير في مجلس القيادة الرئاسي، وتكلمنا حول هذا الأمر مع حلفائنا ومع أصدقائنا أيضا، وفي المقدمة الحكومة الفرنسية باعتبار أن المشروع يتبع شركة توتال وهي الشريك الرئيسي في هذا المشروع. وهناك حديث يدور حول إعادة تصدير الغاز من المشروع. ومن الناحية الفنية أعتقد أن نحن جاهزون للتصدير، ولكن الشركة ربما تشترط أن يكون هناك اتفاق حول القضايا الأمنية المتعلقة بالتخوف من أن تعمل الميليشيات على ضرب المشروع بالصواريخ البالستية التي لديها والتي مهربة لها من النظام الإيراني. ونحن في نعتقد أن هذا الأمر بالنسبة لنا سيكون مفيد، سواء فيما يتعلق بدعم البنية التحتية أو فيما يتعلق بمرتبات الموظفين، أو أيضا إعادة إحياء بعض المشاريع التنموية المهمة بالنسبة لنا. نحن عندنا مشاكل كثيرة متعلقة بالمياه ومشاكل الطرق، مشاكل الخدمات الصحية. طبعا الأخوة الأشقاء بيقدموا لنا الآن كثير من المساعدات، لدينا 13 مشروع بينفذ في عدن الآن في المجالات الصحة والطرق والمياه والكهرباء من قبل الأخوان في المملكة العربية السعودية. لدينا مشروع سد حسان في أبين سيتم تنفيذه من قبل الإمارات العربية المتحدة بتكلفة حوالي 82 مليون دولار، وهذا يمكن أن يحل جزء من مشكلة المياه في عدن، لأنه المياه الجوفية التي تأتي إلى مشروع المياه في عدن غالبها تأتي من آبار في وادي حسان في أبين. هناك مشاريع للطاقة المتجددة أيضا. هناك مرتبات الموظفين، وأنتم تعرفون الآن الموظفين زاد عددهم بشكل كبير مع الحكومة الشرعية والحوثيين. لديهم اتفقنا على كشوفات 2014 بالنسبة للموظفين في صنعاء. يعني نحن أعتقد لن نسخر هذه الإمكانيات حتى لو أتت من مشروع الغاز وتصدير الغاز، لن نسخرها للحروب. نحن اليوم نسخر كل الإمكانيات للتنمية، بينما الحوثيين يسخرون كل الموارد التي يحصلون عليها للمعارك وللتسليح وللعروض العسكرية، ونحن نسخر كل الإمكانيات التي نحصل عليها للتنمية وللخدمات.
Yes, it's unfortunate. Excellency, we only have a brief period in front of us. I wanted to ask you about two things. One, of course, as you noted, we're almost 6 months into the Presidential Leadership Council. There have been issues in some of the cooperation within the PLC, the entities that have joined, and this has been an issue, a question really, for how this government can move forward in a united way. And I know, as you said, that this is very much the focus of what you've been trying to accomplish, is to bring all of these parties that are supporting the legitimacy together. How do we overcome these differences that still exist and make sure that there is a united front before the Houthis, to demonstrate that the people of Yemen really are standing firmly? And then the other question, and you didn't raise this very much, but I did want to ask you, you mentioned the Bab al-Mandeb issue, you mentioned some of these other issues. There is the question of Iran. And I know that this is an area that is of particular concern for you, is the Iranian role in continuing this conflict inside of Yemen. And so if you have any thoughts, if you have any suggestions about how to address the Iranian challenge, how to end Iranian interference in Yemeni affairs. And then if I can ask one last question, and that would be, what advice, what would you like, when you met with Secretary Blinken the other day, what are the things that you would like to see the United States doing more to help support you, to help support the Yemeni people, and to help bring an end to the conflict?
شكرا سعادة السفير. هذه أسئلة مهمة للغاية، أشكرك عليها. أولا فيما يتعلق بالمجلس، أحب أن أؤكد لكم أن هناك إجماع إقليمي ودولي بالنسبة لدعم المجلس، وأنا كنت قبل أسبوعين في أبو ظبي، وكنت قبل أسبوع في الرياض، وهناك توافق وهناك إجماع من حلفائنا الرئيسيين في المملكة والإمارات على دعم المجلس وعلى وحدة والحفاظ على وحدة هذا المجلس واستمرار هذه الوحدة في إطار المجلس. الخلافات لا شك ستكون موجودة، ولا أريد أن أعطي صورة وردية عن الوضع، ولكن نحن حريصين على أن يستمر هذا المجلس وفق الثوابت والقواسم المشتركة، والخلافات نحاول أن نحلها داخل المجلس، أحيانا بالتوافق وأحيانا بالانحياز إلى 4 زائد الرئيس أو 3 والرابع الرئيس. ولكن أحب أن أعطيكم اليوم سر أننا لم أستخدم في إدارتي للمجلس التصويت منذ بدأنا اجتماعات المجلس، وحتى لا يكون هناك فريق غالب وفريق مغلوب في المجلس. فأحاول دائما حتى القضايا الخلافية أحاول أن أجلها قليلا وأعمل فيها مشاورات جانبية، ثم نعود إلى اجتماعاتنا بعد يوم أو يومين ونتوافق على مثل تلك القرارات. طبعا الصراعات البينية في المحافظات هي أصلا موجودة، وأحيانا قد يقف أحد أعضاء المجلس مع طرف ويقف عضو آخر مع طرف آخر، وأحيانا الواقع يسحب بعض الأعضاء إلى مربع الصراع في هذه المحافظات، وهذا وضع طبيعي بيحصل. ولكن نحن نعيد حلقة الصراع من الميدان إلى المجلس وإلى الحوار، وهذا ما نمضي فيه حتى هذه اللحظة. وبالتالي أؤكد لكم أن الوضع داخل المجلس مستمر في معالجة القضايا بنوع من الحوارات والتوافقات والوصول إلى أحيانا حلول مشتركة، وأحيانا يعني توافقية، وأحيانا يكون فيها نوع من الضغط من قبل أكبر عدد داخل المجلس على أحد الأعضاء داخل المجلس، وبالتالي نخرج من أزمات الخلافات حول الكثير من القضايا. أنتم تعرفون أن المجلس أتى من مربعات متقاطعة، والبعض كان يتواجه في الميدان في اشتباكات مسلحة، ونحن نقلنا بتشكيل المجلس هذا الصراع والمواجهات المسلحة إلى الحوار، وهذه خطوة وتحتاج مننا إلى وقت لكي يتعود المجلس على أن الحوار هو أفضل وسيلة لحل كل المشكلات العويصة، وأن الصراع والقتال لن يؤدي إلى حلول، سيؤدي مزيد إلى المشاكل والتعقيدات. وهذه قناعة لدى أعضاء المجلس من حيث المبدأ أن القتال والصراع المسلح يؤدي إلى خلق مشاكل إضافية، وأن الحوار هو الأسلم لحل كل هذه المشكلات. أشقائنا وبدرجة رئيسية في المملكة السعودية والإمارات بيساعدونا في تحقيق هذه الأهداف داخل المجلس، وأنا على تواصل مستمر مع القيادات في البلدين، وأعتقد أننا ماضيين في الطريق الصحيح الذي يؤدي إلى تحقيق أهداف المجلس. فيما يتعلق بإيران والتدخل، أنا كلمتي كانت واضحة في الجمعية العامة أن إيران بالنسبة لنا بتصدر لنا كل ما هو مدمر، أحيانا كثير من القوى بتعتقد أنه الموضوع صراع بين السعودية وإيران في اليمن، وهذا غير صحيح. نحن أولا تربطنا حدود أكثر من 1400 كيلو مع السعودية. نحن لدينا أكثر من 3 مليون يمني يعملون في المملكة العربية السعودية. نحن يعولون هؤلاء في اليمن أكثر من 10 مليون مواطن، يحولون لليمن أكثر من 4 مليار دولار سنويا. هذه مصالح حقيقية لليمنيين. ونحن لدينا أيضا علاقات ثقافية واجتماعية، ونحن نعتبر مع الشعب اليمني والشعب السعودي متشابك في العادات والتقاليد والنسب، وبعض القبائل جزء منها في اليمن وجزء منها في السعودية. هذه العلاقات اليمن يجني منها فوائد ومصالح اقتصادية، وبالتالي نحن علاقتنا مع المملكة العربية السعودية لأن مصلحة شعبنا مع هذه العلاقة. إيران تبعد عننا 4000 كيلومتر. ماذا صدرت إيران لليمن؟ ملايين الألغام والمسيرات والصواريخ البالستية وزعزعة الاستقرار في اليمن. هذا ما أتت به إيران إلى اليمن. ونحن ليس لدينا مشكلة معها. إيران هي التي تدخلت في شؤوننا الداخلية وحولت اليمن إلى مركز للتوسع، وإلى مركز لتصدير الثورة، وإلى مركز لإيذاء الجيران. وللأسف الحوثيون غلبوا مصالح إيران على مصالح أخوانهم اليمنيين. هذه هي مشكلتنا. يعني الحوثيين بيرتكبوا جريمة في حق الشعب اليمني عندما يغلبون مصلحة إيران على مصالح الشعب. الحد من تدخل إيران هذا ليس بمقدورنا نحن. الذي يستطيع أن يحد من التدخل الإيراني هم المجتمع الدولي والحوثيون، متى غلبوا مصلحة اليمنيين على مصلحة إيران. إذا وقف الحوثيون اليوم ويقولون أنه نحن يمنيون ومصلحة اليمن تهمنا، وغلبوا مصلحة اليمن على مصلحة إيران، هنا لا تستطيع إيران أن تعمل شيء في اليمن. والكرة فيما يتعلق بهذا الأمر هي في ملعب الحوثيون وفي ملعب المجتمع الدولي. وكان تصنيف الحوثيين في قوائم الإرهاب في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية كانت خطوة فعلا ستحد من هذا التدخل، ليس في اليمن ولكن في أماكن أخرى. ولكن للأسف تم إلغاء هذا القرار في بداية يعني نجاح الديمقراطيين واستلامهم السلطة في البيت الأبيض. وهذا بالنسبة لنا احنا شيء مؤسف، لأنه حزب الله ضمن يعني ليس هناك فرق بين حزب الله وأنصار الله والحرس الثوري الإيراني. هم كلهم غرفة العمليات في قم، وفي الحرس الثوري الإيراني هي التي تدير هذا المشهد كله، من العراق إلى لبنان إلى سوريا إلى اليمن. فيما بيتعلق باللقاء مع الوزير بلينكن، كان أنا سعيد جدا كنت باللقاء مع السيد بلينكن معالي وزير الخارجية، وكنت قد التقيت فيه في جدة، وكان قد اتصل بي تلفونيا إلى عدن لتجديد الهدنة الأخيرة. وطبعا لا شك أن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بتولي اهتمام بعملية السلام في اليمن، وتولي اهتمام أيضا بالهدنة، ونحن كذلك. نحن نقدر هذا الاهتمام بالسلام. وعندما التقيت أنا بالسيد الرئيس بايدن شكرته على اهتمامه باليمن واهتمامه بعملية السلام، وطلبت منه مزيد من الدعم لليمن وبالذات في الجانب الاقتصادي. ونحن نقدر هذا الاهتمام باليمن تقدير عالي، ولكن لا يوجد لنا شريك للسلام في اليمن. الحوثيون ليسوا شريك سلام لا لليمنيين ولا للعالم، مثلما إيران ليست شريك للعالم اليوم في إرساء قواعد النظام الدولي والابتعاد عن التدخل في شؤون الدول الأخرى وعدم التدخل في زعزعة الاستقرار في المنطقة ودعم المنظمات الإرهابية في العالم. اليوم قيادة تنظيم القاعدة في إيران، واليوم هناك تنسيق معروف لدى الأجهزة الأمنية في العالم كله بين النظام الإيراني، بين الحرس الثوري والنظام الإيراني، وبين تنظيم داعش والقاعدة. وبالتالي نحن نشكر الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والرئيس بايدن والسيد معالي السيد الوزير بلينكن وصديقي العزيز السيد تيم ليندر كينج الذي يبذل جهود كبيرة جدا مع في هذه القضية، ونحن متعاونون معه لأننا نريد أن ينجح تيم في مهمته، ونجاحه نجاح لليمنيين في الأخير. شكرا سعادة السفير.
Thank you, Excellency, and thank you so much. You've been extremely generous with your time with us today, and your comments and answering these questions. And I have had the pleasure of working with you for well over 10 years. I can tell you in all honesty that everyone here was delighted when this position of leadership in the new Presidential Leadership Council was placed in your hands. I don't think that there's anyone who is better suited to try to resolve this conflict and bring Yemen together again than you are. And so we absolutely wish you all of the good fortune and blessings for all of the work that you're doing. You had suggested that I might come call on you in Aden. I would love to do that, but even better, I would love to come call on you at the presidential palace in Sana'a, and I look forward to that day. But thank you so much for spending this time with us, and inshallah, I know you have other meetings and other work to do before you return to Aden over the weekend.
شكرا سعادة السفير، ونراك إن شاء الله في عدن وفي صنعاء قريبا.
Inshallah. Thank you. And for those of you who are in our audience, please stay tuned. We will go immediately to a panel discussion with Ambassador Lenderking and Ambassador Al-Hadrami to continue this conversation. Thank you.
شكرا كثيرا سعادة السفير.
Thank you. And now let me continue, as we said, continue this conversation with two good friends of ours, Tim Lenderking, who you all know, appointed as the special envoy for Yemen by President Biden in February of 2021. One of the first actions that the president took when he came into office was to say that we're going to give Tim Lenderking this task. And so here he is, and Tim is joining us from Jeddah, where he's been engaged in the efforts to continue this ceasefire and hopefully to expand on it. Also delighted to have with us His Excellency Mohammed Al-Hadrami, who has been Yemen's ambassador here to the United States since earlier this year. Prior to that, he served as foreign minister for Yemen and has had a long and distinguished career in Yemen's diplomatic corps since 2004. And prior to that, he was a student here in the United States having earned his bachelor's degree at Missouri State University and his master's degree at Fairleigh Dickinson. So welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us. And let me first give both of you the floor for a few minutes to talk not only about the president's comments, but also, of course, I think people would be extremely interested in hearing your thoughts about how this week's events in New York have gone, what attention has been paid to the Yemen issue, and does that, in fact, open the door for new initiatives and hopefully a resolution. But Ambassador Hadrami, let me turn to you first.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, and I'm happy to see my great friend Tim Binder-King here joining us. And let me start with thanking Middle East Institute and you, Ambassador Feinstein, for having this event possible and in this timely manner. I think Yemen, as we all agree, is moving through a very difficult situation right now. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to highlight some of the messages or key messages, let me say, that were articulated by His Excellency President Rashad al-Alimi, who was in the previous session. And then perhaps we move into a more interactive dialogue with you and Tim and maybe from the audience. And let me just focus on some of the three messages that I could see are some of the main messages from His Excellency's intervention remarks and the subsequent discussion with you. One, I think, is related to the Presidential Leadership Council unity. You know, the Presidential Leadership Council, as you all know, has a tremendous responsibility. And even though it is facing challenges, it is committed to working as one. And to be frank with you, no one expects or anticipated at the beginning that the Presidential Leadership Council huge task and responsibility would be an easy one. I mean, you heard the president speak about this, and it rings true. But we all know that the unity of purpose of the Presidential Leadership Council is a crucial issue, and the president and all the members are committed to enforcing it. And I think that would make a difference in the months and perhaps the years to come. And if we talk about this united purpose, just to kind of define it, it could be mainly in the objectives that it would end the coup, as the president says, reinstate state institutions, and eventually return Yemen to this democratic platform where they could have this civil discourse to elect, to freely discuss their issues, and perhaps discuss and solve some of the great challenges we're facing now, but not at the moment, after we end the coup and return to that platform where we could freely, with everyone involved, like what happened in National Dialogue Conference, which you were a witness to, and discuss them thoroughly, but not at this stage. And that's the crucial thing about the unity of the Presidential Leadership Council. And I'm really delighted to see, and as you heard from the president, that the meeting next week will come and we expect a lot from it. The second issue, which was mentioned first in the president's remarks, is about the truce. You know, the truce, as the president says, is a historic chance for peace. But extending the truce alone, as it stands, to be frank, will not end the war. Our government accepted the truce 6 months ago. And the main objectives of that is to alleviate the suffering of Yemenis and to force the Houthis to talk peace. These are the two main objectives that we accepted the truce: suffering of the Yemenis to be alleviated, and eventually to reach that sustainable truth. But we see as we go after the two extensions, we realize that only the government of Yemen is fulfilling those obligations and not the Houthis. Only the government of Yemen is being pressured more for more concessions, but not the Houthis. So it is vital to understand that extending the truce itself should not be the goal. It rather should be treated as means to achieve the noble goal, which is just and sustainable peace. And for us, a just and sustainable peace, as I explained, is where we have this platform where we could freely elect, freely discuss, freely engage in this civil discourse to write perhaps a new social contract for Yemen to come. And if that happens, we know it's going to be just, and we know it's going to be sustainable. There are a lot of points, but I wanted to talk about Iran. I think it was a good question that you raised, Ambassador, and I think we need to view the Houthis' war in Yemen in part as part of this Iranian, if we will, expansionist project in the region. Because if we don't view it in that angle, I think we'll be missing a lot. You know, Iran's been helping the Houthis for a very long time. And when we know since 2019, they had this Jihan 1 and Jihan 2, two big ships full of weapons. And we were actually in the National Dialogue Conference. So you see, the Houthis would not have been able to do what they're doing now without the support of Hezbollah, without the support of Iran, both in terms of technical expertise, missiles, drones, you name it. So this needs to be dealt from that angle. And as the president says, only the international community, and of course the Houthis, can actually solve this problem. We know the Houthis' view on it. And I think, which is really important to mention now, the JCPOA is a very important tool to send a good signal for Iran that they need to watch their malign activities in the region, and they need to stop supporting not only the Houthis, but other militias in the region if we are to reach a peaceful Middle East in Yemen and elsewhere. I'm going to stop here, Ambassador, and then perhaps engage in more specifics about the truce or any other questions as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. And let me turn to Tim, because not only is he the long-serving now senior special envoy for Yemen, but Tim is in Jeddah as we speak and has been engaged in these negotiations, these dialogues about the truce and where we go from here. And then also, Tim, if you wanted to talk for a moment or two about the U.S. perspective on the meetings in New York, and also, of course, the outstanding work that you and others have done in trying to move the ball on the Safar crisis and get that issue resolved.
Thanks very much, Ambassador Firestein and Ambassador Al-Hadrami. It's great to be with you, two experts and people who really care about the Yemeni people. As we heard from His Excellency, Dr. Rashad Al-Alimi, I had the chance to spend some time with him this week in New York, very valuable, with Secretary Blinken, and then on my own. And one point I think that really comes through is that the PLC, the Presidential Leadership Council, is a very important development. When we look at the progress of the war or the trajectory of the war of the last 7-8 years, actually having a governmental entity like this that is really pushing unity under a lot of great challenges under the leadership of Rashad Al-Alimi, I think is a significant asset, in not only for the United States, but in terms of ending the war. And I think the UN General Assembly this week was an excellent platform for Yemen to be raised, and amidst so many other issues that are really demanding the world's attention. I mean, food insecurity, Ukraine conflict, COVID and climate change, UN reform. But as I told His Excellency, the chairman of the Presidential Leadership Council, it was so important for him to be here and to have meetings with our leadership, but also with the world leadership, and to have that stage at the UN General Assembly yesterday to talk about the conflict in Yemen, but also to meet, the King of Jordan and other GCC countries, and to get a lot of support, I think, which is overwhelmingly what I heard from every meeting that I had that pertained to Yemen, And that includes meetings that I had with representatives from Russia and China. So when we talk about the various instruments that come to bear on this vexing problem and crisis in Yemen, there is a very strong international consensus that the war must end, that it must end through dialogue and political means, that there is no military solution. Frankly, I'm glad that we have this convergence within the P5 that was reaffirmed in meetings I attended, but also among the regional countries around the Gulf and around the Middle East. Secretary this morning chaired a GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, plus the 3 countries whom had participated in the president's meetings in Jeddah, Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt, joined on this occasion by Yemen. After all, if Yemen is to be on the agenda, shouldn't a senior official from the Yemen government be present? So we were delighted to welcome His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Yemen, Awad bin Mubarak, to this breakfast meeting this morning with these other regional leaders. And I think that sort of typifies the prominence that Yemen gets, again, amidst a great demand to focus on many other global issues that are also very deserving. So an excellent opportunity, I felt, at the UN General Assembly. Similarly, on Wednesday, there was a terrific milestone reached regarding the Safar tanker. This is, of course, the vessel that has been off the coast of Yemen for 40 years, and it's filled with 1.1 million barrels of oil. It's an old and aging ship. It is long past its prime. It's considered a dead ship. The motors and the mechanisms on board the ship have died. There's really no maintenance, and there's a great danger that the ship could break up and spill that oil 4 times the amount that the Exxon Valdez spilled off the coast of Alaska in 1989. So it's a very serious problem. And on Wednesday, we joined with the Germans and the Dutch, and of course, the Yemen foreign minister was there as well, to herald that the funding target to move that oil onto a more secure vessel had been reached through a lot of hard work from many different countries, from the UN humanitarian coordinator. The private sector came through with some pledges. The environmental community came through with strong endorsements. And so we were very pleased to announce that the operation to offload this oil will take place this year and remove this immediate environmental threat. There's more to be done. The pledges have to be dispersed. That's all true. And that does need to happen. And we'll need some additional funding for the second phase of disposing of the oil, getting it off the water, and towing away the Safar tanker. But this was a very important development. And I think it sort of typifies the fact that there are positive developments in Yemen now. I agree with the previous speakers that the truce is highly imperfect. There have been attacks that are unfortunate, but by and large, this is a truce that in the U.S. view is quite significant as another milestone that has been reached over the course of 7 or 8 years of fighting, leading us to the conclusion that this now is the best opportunity that Yemen has had for peace since this conflict began. And we look at some of the milestones that have been reached. You have more oil on the market in Yemen, 4 times the amount of oil that was the case last year. 21,000 Yemenis have been able to fly on commercial flights out of Sana'a Airport for the first time since 2016 for medical care, for family reunification. We're looking at additional destinations that could be used. When we talk about the expanded truce, we mean expanded destinations. We mean more oil on the market. We also mean the fulfillment of opening the roads, just as the president said and as the ambassador said, the Houthis haven't fulfilled the terms of the truce here. Rather than opening roads in Taiz, which is Yemen's 3rd largest city, and which has its own humanitarian crisis due to the population living under siege-like conditions imposed by the Houthis, these roads should be open. And that is also part of what the Houthis, I think, need to put on the table. And when we talk about the truce, there are responsibilities on both sides. There are risks that leaders on both sides will have to take if the truce is to be sustained, and what we hope the part of the United States and what I hear 100% support for here in Jeddah is the extension and the expansion of the truce. So on October 2nd, we should not be seeing a situation in which Yemen falls off the cliff and returns to war, but rather that the leaders of the conflict parties come forward, as the Yemen government has said to us privately, in full support of the expansion of the truce. So all of these things, I think, are coming together at a critical time. The UN Special Envoy is in the process of circulating a new proposal that sort of weaves together the roads, the ports, the airline destinations, and we're looking for support from both the Yemen government and the Houthis, Saudi-led coalition as well, for this proposal. Obviously, there are going to be areas of disagreement, and those should go forward to the UN envoy so that he can do shuttle diplomacy as the Security Council has asked him to do, talk to the parties, make the necessary adjustments, and hopefully by the end of this month, which is coming very soon, be able to announce that the truce is continuing. Because again, I think we've all agreed that there isn't a military solution here. I think the Yemeni people are going to be the most disappointed if shots start firing and cross-border activity takes place again across the Yemen-Saudi border, from Yemen into the UAE and other countries. I think the region's tired of this conflict in the sense of the amount of destruction and the misery, I think, that the Yemeni people have had to endure. And now there is, through moments like having, Rashad Al-Alimi here in New York, and you're giving him this platform to talk to so many people today, really shines the light on Yemen when it could be shown in so many different ways. And we really have to take advantage of the momentum that has come about in the last few months, building on the PLC's commitment to this effort, and the good work of the ambassador here and the UN envoy and other officials to really drive this moment forward. So thank you again, and delighted to be with you both, and to thank again His Excellency for joining this program. Back to you, Jerry.
Thanks, Tim, and absolutely, I think it was a great opportunity for people to meet, maybe for the first time, Rashad Al-Alimi, and to hear him present his views so clearly and articulately. If I could stay with you for one more second, because you, of course, have worked very closely with Hans Grunberg since he became the special envoy, with Martin Griffiths before that. Understood, of course, that we do want, at the very least, to see a continuation of this ceasefire that's been in place. As you said quite correctly, it's not 100% perfect, but it certainly has given millions of Yemenis a respite from the fighting, from the bombing and elsewise. But there is still that question of the transition, and even when you talk about some of the things that Hans Grunberg is going to put on the table, there is still no political horizon there. So what's your estimate of the capacity really to move beyond simply these confidence building measures that have really been the focus until now, to get down to some of the core issues that are needed in order to get to a sustainable peace?
Yeah, this is a key issue, Ambassador. I'm glad you raised it, and so did Ambassador Al-Hadrami, and I think he made an excellent point, and it's very much the way that the United States sees this as well. But while we do think the truce is significant, and the fact that it started in April, was extended in June, was extended for the second time in August, but it's only the beginning, right? It's really only the warm-up act here. What we're really keen to see is exactly what the ambassador said here. We need to get to the durable ceasefire, and not a truce which is fragile, but a durable ceasefire where you have the mechanics of an operations room, and you have the two sides in regular contact with each other, ideally at a sort of an operations center where, when there are inevitable violations, that they can be dealt with immediately. And so, these violations can be managed and don't totally inflame the situation and tip it over. So I think that moving to the durable ceasefire, but ultimately the political negotiations, which I think Yemenis so desperately want, which is the opportunity, I think, to come together again, as they did during the national dialogue, where you, Jerry, were present, and were such a positive force. That moment that was essentially torpedoed by the Houthis, when there was a coming together of elements of Yemeni society, civil society and women's groups and so forth, that held such great promise. And I think we need to come back to that when the parties, however those are defined, and it's not necessarily for us to do that, but to create the platform with strong international support, which we have now. But I don't think it's indefinite support, right? You look at the challenges that are weighing down on the international community, on the donors who whom we need to stay engaged on Yemen to keep the humanitarian situation from teetering to the brink. So we feel that the truce is the vehicle to get there. Until somebody has a better idea, that's the vehicle we have. And so on October 2nd, let's say, when it's extended and expanded and gives us a little bit more diplomatic space to work on these two goals, the durable ceasefire and the political dialogue, that's how I think we're to get there. It starts with a certain amount of confidence building. And I look at meetings of the military commission, which, from the Houthi side, from the Yemen government side, the Saudi-led coalition, these representatives at the technical military level met 3 times in Amman, Jordan, in the past couple of months. Yes, there were raised voices. There was pounding on the table. There were threats to storm out, but they also, smoked shisha together. They broke bread together. These are important things from elements who have been such strong combatants over the last 7 years. So I don't knock that. I appreciate that. I also think it's not enough, and there has to be sort of wholesale engagement across these very difficult lines. Again, with support from the international community, from the immediate neighbors of Yemen, the Omanis, the Saudis, the Emiratis in particular, bolstering and supporting this effort. So I'm really, I think the U.S. efforts are very much engaged on getting us over the hump on October 2nd, and really using that momentum to launch more energetically into this territory, which ultimately gets Yemenis together, deciding the future of their own country, and foreigners out of Yemen, other than as embassies eventually and as donors and that kind of thing. But ending foreign interference, I think, in Yemen is something that we support.
Thanks, Tim. And I'm going to turn to Ambassador Al-Hadrami in a second. But before we do that, I do want to alert our audience to the fact that in about 10 minutes, you're going to take off to run for your airplane. So if we don't come back to you, thank you again for joining us. And thank you again, obviously, for all of the great work that you've been doing for these last 18 months. But let me turn to you, Mohammed, and ask you one of the things that we talked about, and I did. You talked about the PLC and the role that they play. Obviously, one of the key issues, one of the key challenges, even within the PLC and more broadly in the society, is this question of Yemen's national unity. At the end of this conflict, and it will end someday, is there going to be a unified Yemen? What is the role of the Presidential Leadership Council, of President Al-Alimi, in trying to ensure that we do As the president said, you know, that the PLC is committed to the implementation of UNSCR 2216 that does speak to Yemen's territorial integrity. How are we going to ensure that at the end of this process, we come out with a unified Yemen? You're on mute.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Of course, the sovereign question and unity of Yemen is one of the main issues, and as you remember, it was one of the main subjects that was debated, talked about, and solutions were brought forth at the National Dialogue Conference during the 10 long months, dialogue. And I think, and I believe that it is a very important issue that needs to be dealt with. But as the president has said, the Presidential Leadership Council's role now is to end the coup and return to that transitional period where the Southern question and other questions perhaps would be dealt with then. Because if you look at it right now, we have brought forth so many just solutions within the National Dialogue Conference. Perhaps they're not perfect, but they were the best solutions Yemenis could come up with during that time. It doesn't mean that we don't have to go back and look at them again. However, this is not the time for it. And I think that there is a general agreement within the Presidential Leadership Council to focus on ending the war, ending the coup, ending the intervention of Iranians within Yemen, so we could get to that platform I talked about where everyone, including the Southerns, could talk about their grievances, what they need to do, and then talk about Yemen as united, whether it's in a federal state, 4, 6, those regions. All this could be talked to in the civil discourse once we end the coup. We can't now talk about such questions where we have the Houthis trying to get to Marib, where we have the Houthis that are actually sieging on Taiz and trying to threaten so many millions of Yemenis everywhere. I don't think it is the right time. And I'm happy to say that when we talk to the Presidential Council, including the members, that they all of them share that we need to talk about it, but it's not the time to do so right now. So I think that is the right approach at the moment for this. And just to get to one of the point that Tim, because he's still around and I know he has to catch a flight. We do want to extend the truce. I mean, we want to end the fighting today. You have to realize that the only one who could end the fighting is the Houthis, because they're the one who started it to begin with. If the Houthis decide to end the war today, I guarantee you we could be back in Sana'a by next week. It's all in their hands. The problem is they don't want to talk peace. They don't want to concede and share power. And we have seen it over and over again. The Houthis are experts in hijacking issues for their benefits. Safed is one example. Sana'a Airport is a case in point, and I can talk about that for a very long time. And also the siege in Taiz. And we have to realize that the signals from outside would influence this. And that comes also to the Iranian influence. In Kuwait, we were there, but they didn't see the picture. And they were greedy, and they moved forward. So we want to extend the truce. But as it stands right now, it reminds me of Stockholm, to be honest with you. Back in 2018, I could see the same thing happening again today. We were pressured. We need to solve the Hodeidah issue. The Hodeidah agreement is good. It was vague. 13 points was not clear enough. We raised it. We were pressured. And we said, everything's going to be okay. Well, 4 years later, you see where Hodeidah is. The Maha is hijacked, and we don't see a resolution to it. So I honestly don't want to see the truce going that route, where the Houthis renege, and then we're pressured to concede, and then we move on, and then we will get surprised after a year or 6 months that we don't have this just and sustainable peace. Well, because the Houthis are not doing what they're supposed to do. And if the Houthis would ask something and get it for free, and then we move on because the international community is pressuring the responsible party, the party that is recognized in the world and comes to the UN. It's easy to pressure. But I think the international community needs to understand, if we want to reach a peaceful solution in Yemen, they need to start pressuring the Houthis and the Iranians as well, because they would have a say in what the Houthis continue to do.
I think, and that's, I think that you've put your finger on this issue, and so I guess the question is how. I think that we can all agree, if you look at the track record of the Houthis, and not only since 2014, you can go all the way back to 2004. You can look at the 6 rounds of conflict between the Houthis and the government when Ali Abdullah Saleh was in power, where, consistently the Houthis reach agreements and then they violate the agreements. You can look at September 2014, the Peace and National Partnership Agreement. You can look at Stockholm. You can look at the Hodeidah Agreement. You can look at these ceasefires. And there is a well-established track record of the Houthis not living up to their commitments, and in fact, renouncing them as soon as the ink was dried. And so the question is, how do you change that calculation? How do you, you talk about pressuring the Houthis. What is the pressure point that will make the Houthis change? One of the questions that we have from the audience is, is the PLC prepared to go back to military conflict with the Houthis if these ceasefires don't work? Nobody wants to see that. Nobody would think that that's a good strategy for the way forward. And yet, what is the alternative?
If I may, well, it's a very important question, Ambassador. And I tell you this, we need to pressure the Houthis. And I agree with him. There's no military solution for the crisis in Yemen. However, there will be no peace without military pressure. So military solution and military pressure, they're two different things. So the how, in my personal belief, is to have a plan B. When the first week of the Presidential Leadership Council, the president in his first speech says this is a council of peace, but also a council of power. So you have to have the tendency in extending your hand for peace, but you do have to have something else in the other hand. Otherwise, the Houthis will never come to peace. So yes, we do have to have a plan B if nothing happens. And unfortunately, we would have to go to war. I mean, it's really hard to see it otherwise. We will not, myself, and I know the government and the president, accept a Yemen where the Houthis are dominating with this ideology. I will not accept a future where my kids and their kids are put in a place where they believe that small sect have the divine right to rule from God, and all of this ideology that comes, and now they're trying to shove the throat of all Yemenis. Even in schools, they started in some areas, and now they're teaching death to America even in elementary school and then middle school. And you would find ourselves within 10 years, if this is not solved, with indoctrinated kids hating the West and America, and then it would be very hard to fix. I always say the hard work starts when the war ends, which is rebuilding Yemen. And I'm not just talking about the infrastructure and the lives and the schools and the jobs. I'm talking about the social cohesion, these things that you can't fix very quickly. Yemen is not a sectarian war. As the president says, it's not a war between Saudi and Iran in Yemen, but the Houthis are changing that as we speak. So when I spoke a few years back and says, well, no, this is a misconception, Yemen is not a sectarian war. Well, I see what they're teaching in school, and God knows what would happen next year when people really believe that Shia and Sunni would be fighting in Yemen, something that you never heard before. So how to end this? We need to have a plan B. We do need to have a plan B. Military pressure works because it would send the right signals to the Houthis that you need to cut your losses and take what you have. If they don't see this, then they will not be able to. I mean, they don't have enough money to pay salaries, and yet they have this parades that cost billions of Yemeni riyals just to show force. I mean, they need to listen and to hear to some of the strong messages. And we do like some of the messages we heard from Secretary Blinken and from President Biden on this. And I think that needs to be repeated. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. And I think Tim has left as he told us he would need to. So let me ask you a couple of other questions in the time that we have left. One, there was some discussion, and I think the president made reference in his speech at the General Assembly yesterday about the impact of climate change on Yemen. And I think that with everything else going on in the world right now, there hasn't been as much attention paid to that. We've seen, of course, the terrible monsoon rains in Pakistan, but Yemen has also suffered this year from climate-related weather issues, and I think that it would be helpful if you could talk and explain to people exactly what's been going on and what the impacts have been about climate in Yemen. And then the other thing is if you could talk a little bit more. And again, we know because of the fallout from the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the global crisis of food insecurity has hit countries like Yemen particularly hard, and so it's not only the direct consequences of food exports, but also the overall challenge of the international community to try to address all of the various humanitarian crises around the world, and the effect that that's having on the ability to continue to help the Yemeni people survive during this period of prolonged conflict. So I think that people need to hear, people should hear about some of these impacts on Yemen from these global phenomena.
Yeah, you know, climate change is the crisis that is facing everyone, and it's a tragedy that now you don't hear me talking about joining the UNFCCC adaptation fund or mitigation efforts, which Yemen actually should be sending huge delegations to deal with, which would help us, least developed countries, in both mitigating the climate change. You see the torrential rains and others. Some could be good, but without having this ability to benefit from it, it's really hard to see how we can go forward. And with this mechanisms, like the COP is coming soon, and the UNFCCC dealing with so many things that would help countries like us in terms of adaptation, green funds. We don't have the ability now to be able to engage as we should Yemen now because of the war. So it's unfortunate how the war is distracting so much needed attention to so many vital issues that would affect us in the future. And we have the tools to deal with them now, but we lack the ability or the resources or the attention to actually pay more attention to that. That's a bit tragic. Food security is another issue. And as you said rightfully, I mean, Yemen, before the Russia-Ukrainian war, was receiving close to 47 of its imports, which is 95% of what we consume from that region, both from Russia and Ukraine. If you had asked me this question just 3 months ago, I would be very concerned because we were panicking. We didn't have enough for a month or two back then because all of a sudden is cut. And you know, in Yemen, private sector is actually importing. It's not the government anymore. So it is a bit different. And then we see the effect kind of follows in when merchants try to get these food from elsewhere. it becomes pricey, it becomes a commodity, and hoarding was a problem. We have countries that banned the exports of wheat, and we suffered so much to actually find replacements. I know the US and USA tried to help us a lot in this, but I'm happy that just a month ago we had a release, one ship from the region because of the Turkish intervention and agreement. And we had managed to get some replacements for the ships that, for example, we were supposed to get from India. And because of the ban back in May, we couldn't get them. So we were facing the Houthis, facing the humanitarian crisis, and at the same time, finding ourselves facing a huge problem like food security, where people in the past, we were saying, shelves are full, but people cannot afford them because of inflation, because they don't have salaries. We were at a point where we would be actually saying, well, they can't afford it, and it's not even in a shelf anymore. So I'm hoping that we pass this problem now, and I hope that in the future they would find, and we were supported by the US and others, that they would either help put pressure on some countries to give Yemen exceptions, or probably find ways. So our private sector was just really working so hard in Yemen. My hat is off to them to support this vital issue that you mentioned.
Great. Excellency, we've taken a lot of time, and I think that we've covered a lot of the ground. I think that, again, this has been an important week for Yemen in New York, an opportunity really to focus international attention again on the Yemen crisis, and hopefully to bring together the world powers. I thought that one of the comments that Tim made was important, and that is when I was in Yemen, one of the reasons I think that that we were relatively successful in bringing a transition plan to the table that the Yemenis negotiated, and the role that the international community played in supporting that negotiation effort depended an awful lot on the fact that there was a consensus within the permanent 5 members of the Security Council that we all agreed on the importance of finding a peaceful resolution of the political crisis in Yemen in 2011. And at a moment in time when the international community is so divided, when we are in the middle of a very difficult period with the Russians over Ukraine invasion, where there's obvious tension between the United States and China, the United States, our Western allies, and China and Russia, that Yemen is still something that the international community can agree on, and that understanding the importance of trying to find a peaceful resolution, of trying to get the political transition that started in 2011, and that really, as you know, you were there, you were very much a key player in that period, had so much promise that Yemen was going to be the country affected by the Arab Spring that was going to find the right formula for sustaining a peaceful transition. And yet to look at the situation we're in today, 8 years later, and the terrible tragedy that's befallen the Yemeni people, to sustain the international community support, to try to find a way out of this, to try to help Yemen get back up on its feet, and to achieve the kind of peace and political way forward that we all hoped for 11 years ago, I think is something that is positive and hopeful for the future.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. And I My heart really aches when I see a beautiful country like Yemen, and you've been there. We have so many treasures to show. I mean, we have Socotra. It's a beautiful island, none like it in the world. I mean, it would actually shame the Game of Thrones series if they find out about the dragon blood tree in it. We have coffee, which is originated in Yemen, a treasure that we need to cherish. We're so diverse yet unique. We could be leading in the region if we only have stability. Smartest people I've seen. I mean, yes, I mean, I'm from Yemen, but you could see so much potential. We don't need any help from anyone else. We just need some stability, good governance. And I am sure I would love, as an ambassador, to talk about these good things about Yemen, how great Yemen is, how welcoming, how the food is great, and not talk about the emaciating bodies in the New York Times or the bombing here or there. It really breaks my heart to see a beautiful country like my own suffers for so long just for the greed of a few. And thank you very much, Ambassador, for having us today.
Thank you, Excellency, and have a safe trip back to Washington. And we will, inshallah, see you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.